Welcome back to the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm your host and co-founder, Aaron Breitman, and it is my pleasure to welcome on game day Michigan great Jake Butt, who's also the color analyst for tonight's game on BTN. Jake, thanks so much for being here.
Happy to be here, man. I'm glad we got the chance to connect. Excited to cover this team. I've had some experiences with them. I think they're in two teams really in different spots right now. That doesn't mean good or bad, but it'll be interesting to cover the team and for Wimsatt too. Just trying to take that next step. He's clearly talented. He's got every throw you need him to make. There's no limit athletically or physically, but just to get the chance to watch him as he develops.
So let's start there. Your obvious experience, as a player, I guess, what would your approach be if you were in that huddle as a key offensive player to help a quarterback like that in a spot like tonight, where it's obviously the biggest game of his career?
Well, we could start last week and say, hey, there was too many drops, and Shiano said that. The players know it. Everyone knows it. There was drops. There was penalties in key situations where you're driving the ball, you get a first down, it's third and short, whatever it might be. Penalties are momentum killers for a young quarterback. You do everything you can to make it easy on him. Penalties, drops, mistakes. There was a couple times he was throwing to receivers, and it didn't look like he was exactly on the same page. And I don't know whose fault that is, but you have to get on the same page. So if you're in the huddle, it starts with that. It says, hey, we all have to do our job to our best abilities to give our young, talented quarterback the best chance to succeed. It's a really good Michigan defense, too, and they do some things in terms of disguising coverages that are really going to make it tough on a young quarterback. But got a fun fact for you. Campanelli, the offensive coordinator, he's from Bergen County. Bergen Catholic, right? My uncle
Right.
Ronnie, I'm marrying into the Cardi family. Ronnie Cardi's the receiver coach out there. They're like best friends. So I got some ties out here to New Jersey too. All my in-laws are down there in Oakland. So I was able to connect with Coach Campanelli the other day and had that common friend as well. And he'll need to help his quarterback out.
That's cool. Certainly a good fact for Rutgers fans to know. And talking about that Michigan defense, they lead the Big Ten in Big Ten play with 18 sacks. How much do you expect them to bring the pressure and like you said, change different looks for Wimsatt, but also just in terms of blitzing and giving him pressure, throughout the game?
I think it's less about who they play. I think that this is just their identity at this point, and this is the defense they want to get to. Just in terms of an aggressive mindset. I think last year, you didn't need to blitz as much if you were Coach McDonald at the time, the defensive coordinator, because you had Aiden Hutch and David Ojabo. Those two guys could get after the quarterback in a 3-man, 4-man pressure. This year, you may not have that guy that's going to consistently win throughout the game. So you have to go into the blitz package a little bit more to try to generate some pressure. And that's become their identity. And they've done a good job, I would say. Sometimes when you pressure, you leave yourself vulnerable in the back end. There hasn't been wide open receivers running downfield. They haven't been sacrificing coverage in order to pressure the quarterback. So it's a good balance.
And just in terms of the offense for Michigan, for Rutgers fans that aren't as familiar, obviously the change from Cade McNamara to JJ McCarthy, I know it's 75% completion percentage. What else has he brought to the Michigan offense that's kind of elevated them this year?
Oh, he's got an ability to change the game with his feet too. When the play breaks down, he's an extremely explosive runner, and that even if you don't get to it, the ability to get to it creates a lot of problems for defenses, and it's the same thing for Wimsatt too. He's been beat up. The hit last week is concerning. I don't think they're going to. I would like to see him run a little bit more. I think it's one of his strengths, but with the context of where he's at, I don't know that Rutgers would want to and put him in that vulnerable situation. But it's the same thing with JJ. It's like, hey, this guy can run. He will keep it in read options. If he drops back and it's not there, he can extend the play and then has the arm strength to throw downfield, or he can tuck it and run. The challenges for JJ, and I don't think this is actually a JJ thing. I think it's just the nature of Michigan's offense. He doesn't throw the ball down the field, and Michigan doesn't throw the ball down the field quite a bit. The yards per completions and the yards per attempt are a little bit lower than the completion percentage might show. What I would like to see out of them Not as an alum, as an analyst, what I would like to see from them as a team that's trying to push for the college football playoff, and not just there, to then extend and win the college football playoff, you have to stretch the defense, not just horizontally, which is what they do in the run game, but vertically. You have to force a defense to cover the whole field. And when you can do that, it makes it really, really hard to stop. They're already really hard to stop because of how good that offensive line is and the tight ends are. But to add an extra element, I think they're capable of it. I say, why not?
That makes a lot of sense, and it brings me to my next question in terms of Rutgers. They've been very good against the run this year, struggled, though, in 2 games against Ohio State, and then last week, Minnesota. Last year at Michigan, they really shut Michigan down on the run. What do they need to do to be able to do that again? And I guess how improved is that offensive line compared to last year for Michigan?
I want to say because that Minnesota game is deceiving. I think it's deceiving, honestly. It was close through the first half, and even the run game, like Mo Ibrahim, he had a really, really good game. But I think that there's some things Rutgers can do to help themselves, because what happens is they build favorable numbers in the box. They have a pretty solid run defense in terms of the rankings throughout the year. Ohio State, Minnesota affect that. But last week in Minnesota, if Minnesota has 5 linemen and 1 tight end, that's 6 blockers. On a number of occasions, Rutgers was building 7 or 8 run defenders, so they had favorable numbers. The safeties are aggressive and they are willing to come down and hit and play the run. So they had favorable numbers. The problem is as Mo Ibrahim was running up through the hole, Rutgers' extra defenders were hitting him from the side. They'd contact him in the backfield at the line of scrimmage, but it wasn't a clean hit where they could put all their force into it. And Mo's a strong back. So throughout the game, his yards after contact and broken tackles allowed him to turn a 1 or 2 yard gain to a 5, 6, 7 yard gain. And that just adds up. If you give a guy 30 carries, 3 extra yards after contact, that's 90 yards throughout the game. Now I don't think it was that. He did have close to 100 yards after contact, but it's little things like that. And Blake Corum does the same thing as Mo. He's really good at making people miss. He's really good at yards after contact. This is going to be a big week for the guys that are free in the hole to try to not just make the tackle, but stop Blake in his tracks and end up pushing him backwards. If you could do that, not every time, but if you can do that consistently, you're going to give yourself a pretty darn good chance. It is a challenge. Michigan, I watched Michigan's offensive line. They are very, very talented. I would say from a schematic standpoint, Aaron, is last week Minnesota runs a zone scheme. So if you're thinking about it, it's the offensive line is all moving in unison. There's no one kind of breaking against the grain. They're all stepping left. They're all stepping right. Michigan runs zone 2. Michigan is a gap scheme to me, and they pull people. And what that means is you might have your front side linemen, they're blocking down into their gap, and then you pull guys against the grain. The front side's blocking down, the back side is pulling against the grain, whether that's a lineman or a tight end. And what that does is you get a strong downhill double team front side. And then you get big pullers that are coming up with momentum on linebackers and secondary elements. And Michigan's backs do a great job with their patience and setting up the blocks to then put their foot in the ground. And it's hard to get a clean hit on him if it isn't bottled up. If they get out to the edge, man, an arm tackle, they're going to get 4, 5, 6 yards every time. So that's the challenge, just for Rutgers defense to have great gap integrity, to make sure all gaps are accounted for, and to make sure you're winning at the point of attack in your one-on-one matchups.
That's a great point, and that was a problem that Rutgers had last week. They had 13 missed tackles, 9 credited to Ibrahim, and the gaps were, definitely an issue at times. So definitely a key, I think, for Rutgers defense that you point out. As a former player, I guess, how much does it factor? Rutgers played Michigan to a 1-score loss the last 2 years after, many years of getting blown out. Does that do anything for the Rutgers players having more confidence regardless of, last week going into this game? And does it mean anything on the Michigan side, having a lot of those guys back that, know that Rutgers played them tough last year in the Big House?
I'm always of the belief that both teams you don't need to look at history. You need to play your best game today. Now, that being said, you can say if you're Rutgers, you're like, hey, we played Michigan tough last year. They had a chance to win it late. They had the ball with the chance to go down and at least tie the game. Um, this game on paper is a challenge for Rutgers, and that's not a mystery to anybody, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. But there's certain things that happen in these games in order for it. First off, you got to keep it close throughout. You got to make sure that you give yourself a chance to win. Now, that starts with playing turnover-free football. Rutgers, when they've lost, a lot of turnovers have hit the board. When they've won, they've been very, very safe with the football. Now, Michigan isn't exactly great at taking the ball away, but turnovers are huge in these kind of games. So you got to play turnover free, and then your defense has to generate some turnovers. That's a key. And then, frankly, if you're Rutgers, you got to sit there and say, we have to play our best football, and you need a little help, whether it is turnovers, whether it is mistakes. And all of a sudden, if you look up late in the first half, second quarter, early in the third quarter, if this is a game, all of a sudden you can start to feel the belief of the sideline that was the underdog start to really, really build. And you can start to feel the pressure of the favorite start to build too. Like, wow, how do we get in this situation? It's kind of the anatomy of an upset. And I think Shiano's a phenomenal coach. I really enjoyed our conversations with him. I've known him since his time at Ohio State. I think he's an excellent football coach and an excellent leader. The injuries to the Rutgers team throughout the year, it hurts. It really does hurt. But you can never count anybody out, especially with Shiano as a coach, because he's going to have his guys ready, prepared, and if they can execute it, they can play.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about the pressure, because I think last year, the second half of that game, even over through the TV screen, you could feel the pressure mount in the big house, and even for the tension within the fans and the crowd. When Rutgers was able to keep it close, it certainly made it a tenuous situation. I think tonight's going to be interesting. It's close to a sellout. I think there's going to be a lot of Michigan fans in attendance, which obviously helps them a little bit on the road. Not that they need help, but in terms of the advantages they have coming in. But I think that's part of it too, in terms of the home crowd. It's going to be a little bit more split tonight than maybe against Iowa and Nebraska when it was predominantly Rutgers fans.
Yeah, I mean, it's an environment is an environment, though. I think at the end of the day, as a player, you're the man in the arena. You're like a modern day gladiator. You like to go out there and have the opportunity to perform and make plays in front of a bunch of live eyes and a bunch of people watching live on their TV screens. It's always good to have a home field advantage, and it's certainly helpful. But as an entertainer, as a player, you embrace the moment regardless. I personally always liked playing road games just because I liked the fact that I had the chance to be the villain and go on the road. You're right. It's going to probably be a split crowd. We'll see. It'll be close. It'll be a good crowd. We know that. I think they were saying it's going to be nearly sold out. And I think that's going to be the fun part of it is you're going to have guys having a chance to compete and make plays in front of a bunch of live fans.
So that's a good segue. Wanted to mention, obviously, I've seen articles where you consider the greatest tight end in Michigan history. You had a tremendous career at Michigan. You played in two unique games against Rutgers at Rutgers, being 2014 when Rutgers did win, and then 2016, which was the worst game in this series for Rutgers fans, losing 78-0. I guess as a player, what do you remember about those two experiences and how, opposite ends of the spectrum they were for you, just in terms of that series, but also, probably in your career playing at Michigan? I think that was probably the biggest one you were ever a part of, right? In terms of margin.
Oh, yeah, totally. Opposite ends of the spectrum, too, because, my goodness, you want to talk about the very low end of – I mean, that was a very low point in Michigan's program where, like, we were barely hanging on and trying to hold on and trying to prove ourselves, and played a horrendous game. And it's also credit to Rutgers, though. I don't want to take anything away. There's a couple things I remember. There was little. It's always about moments in these games, and I remember Frank Clark, who's the $100 million pass rush for the Kansas City Chiefs. He blows through the line of scrimmage, and he's ready to tackle your quarterback, and you're all sitting there on the sideline like, oh, thank God, Frank's in there. He's our best pass rusher. And something happens where he's going. I forget who the quarterback was at the time. He's going to wrap him up. Quarterback shrugs him off, makes a play, scores a touchdown, and like the air gets sucked out of your sidelines. It's a similar thing to what you're saying. All of a sudden you're excited. You're like, thank God. And then next thing you know, it's like someone rips your heart out. Rutgers makes the play. You end up going up. It was a huge, huge play in the game. I also remember Tyler Croft was the tight end, and I
Yep.
was like, this guy's good. I was a sophomore at the time, and I was watching him like, all right, I gotta get right. I want to be like this guy one day. He just was so efficient, moved very well, great hands. There was a play. I was coming off my first ACL at that point, and I hadn't really had a big game or a breakout game. We had schemed a play during the week where I started out wide, out way to the left of our formation, and I motioned down inside. And if it was split safety, I was going to bluff the linebacker and then run between the safeties, and Devin Gardner was going to hit me. Get the perfect look. Sitting there, and it's like, all right, I know I'm going to get the ball. This is my chance. I can score. I go up there. I bluff the linebacker. It's perfect. I'm running down the field, and the ball is just a little too far out there, and the safeties are converging. And I just reached out with one hand, and I caught it, and it was an awesome catch and like ducked the safeties. And that was like one of my first big plays coming back from my ACL. So I remember that, and then I remember the Matt Weil kick. We had a chance to win the game on a field goal. The distance was such that he had to have a lower trajectory, and it was blocked. And I mean, quiet plane ride home, and that was the beginning of the end. And then the other one was, I mean, we were a juggernaut in 2016 when I was still playing at Michigan. That was one of the most talented football teams I've ever been a part of. And it was a good day for us and a tough day for Rutgers. And we were clicking on all cylinders in that game.
So I guess for your perspective now, you're a broadcaster, your first year, you're coming to Rutgers to broadcast the Michigan-Rutgers game. Obviously, Michigan fans love you. How do you approach it from your perspective in terms of endearing yourself to Rutgers fans as well, who might, be a little apprehensive knowing one of the best Michigan players ever is, calling the game from a impartial perspective?
I would say it's totally fair. Thankfully, I called Hawaii, Michigan to start the year. And that was my first game. Like, this is like my 7th game I've called. It's a lot that goes into these games. So I hope no one expects me to be perfect, but I got the chance to call that Hawaii, Michigan game. And, I'm like, hey, that was all right. That was pretty good. I went back and watched the film, and there was so much I knew I could improve upon. And that's been the case regardless of who I called. I've been trying to improve each week. I'd say it's not necessarily about endearing myself to Rutgers fans or endearing myself to Michigan fans, really. It's endearing myself to my role as an analyst. My job is to talk about what I see and to analyze football and to provide context and color where and when it's appropriate. I'm not here to – I'm here to be I hope what I'm judged upon is an honest – analysis of the game, and that's what you can hold me to throughout this. Again, there's plenty to talk about for both teams, and I'm prepped for every scenario that could unfold this night. And I'm going to just talk about what I see. And the one thing I say too is, there's some analysts, especially when I was playing, I don't see the need to push anybody down ever. I don't see the need to be negative. Because if something's negative, usually there's a countering positive. And even when something appears negative, there's oftentimes positives to take it away from. I know how hard it is for these players and for these coaches, for all teams. So I try to make sure that I'm building guys up and uplifting them always, rather than pushing them down. There's enough of that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And, just remember, you got to make your in-laws happy too, in terms of being from New Jersey. So I'm sure they'll grade you harder than anybody else.
That's right.
In terms of tonight.
They're Italians. So they'll let you hear it, man. I'll tell you what. My Pop and Nana, Jerry and Jerry, they're like the original New York Italians. They let me know if I'm doing good. They let me know if I'm doing bad. And their son Ronnie, again, he's the receiver coach at Bergen Catholic. Goes way back with some guys on your staff. So got to make sure I do a good job for them as well.
So last question for you, from a Rutgers perspective, what do they need to do tonight to be competitive and give Michigan another, close game and battle?
I'm going to start defensively, because what I always expect is Michigan's going to run the ball. I also expect Rutgers to find ways to build favorable numbers similar to what they did in Minnesota last week. You cannot allow Blake to break a significant amount of tackles. You cannot allow Blake Corum to get a significant amount of yards after contact. If you can make some of these plays and you force Michigan into a 3rd and long situation, JJ McCarthy's completion percentage goes down significantly in third and long. I think he's sub 50% completion percentage. So if you can get him in those situations, and you'll have opportunities as a Rutgers defense to make tackles in the backfield, you can live with that. Offensively, you have a young quarterback. I think losing Sam Brown was really tough. He was flat. He was flashing. He was looking good. That's a tough injury. So you need other guys to step up. Starts with protecting Wimsatt when he's in the pocket, give him a clean pocket, and allow him to progress through his reads. I think, I'd like to see them get into some RPOs, some read options, some more modern, fast-paced offenses. I think what an RPO does is it allows you to always build favorable numbers. If Michigan is light in the box, you can hand the ball off and you have favorable numbers in the run game. If they're over heavy in the box, you can pull it and then you can get into the pass option. Those passes are 1-2 reads. They're very clean, very easy reads. You start the game out like that, and all of a sudden you can have some confidence for Wimsatt. And then for him, getting him out of the pocket, he's got a cannon of an arm, maybe some double moves downfield, let him take some shots. And all it takes for you to connect on a couple of these, and the pressure is on and the pressure is mounting. So I certainly think Rutgers has a very good chance, but it's about very early in this game starting fast and doing what they need to do to put some pressure on Michigan.
Jake Butt, former Michigan great, calling the game tonight. Looking forward to your coverage. Really appreciate your insight right now. I know you're busy today. Can't thank you enough, and appreciate all your time. And again, look forward to hearing your call tonight.
Thanks, Aaron.